I'm now going to hand the floor over to your first speaker of today. Now, this is somebody that I met, I've known him for almost 10 years. He was at the forefront of building route development teams across sub-Saharan Africa, but the model that's been created, and of course it's bespoke, is globally leading. Loads of awards off the back of this, and the biggest reward and award is the amount of new routes that have been developed. So it was under his tenure that the Cape Town Air Access team was created 10 years ago. I'm sure you've all heard about that. That's one of the most successful route development teams globally, and we have the Cape Town Air Access team with us as well, so Melissa and Paul are here today as well. Tim Harris also has served as the Shadow Minister of Finance in South Africa. He's been the chair of South Africa Tourism, and he's been the CEO of Wesgrow as well, which is the tourism trade and investment promotion agency for Cape Town and the Western Cape. So after that long introduction, please welcome Tim to the stage.
As John said, this is a little bit of what I've done, and the story of the work that we've done in air service development around the region begins, as John said, in Cape Town 10 years ago, when I was responsible for running the regional development agency that was working on getting tourists, getting investors, driving exports, bringing conferences, bringing more film production. And one of the things we realized sitting in Cape Town is that the thing holding back all of those aspirations, and maybe you and your destination share some of those aspirations, the thing that was holding us back was connectivity. At that point, all of the investors visiting us, all of the tourists, all of the filmmakers, all of the buyers had to come largely through Johannesburg or another regional hub. And we created a project then called Cape Town Air Access to solve connectivity for Cape Town. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. What's happened since then is our firm has taken that model to multiple other destinations, all of whom are here today, to grow connectivity regionally for Africa using a collaborative air service development model. And that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about this morning. Different options to do air service development and our lessons for success and driving new routes in that very competitive landscape that John spoke about earlier. You can go to the next slide. Thanks very much. Should I hand this? There we go. We're live. Okay. So the secret that we've learned over the last 10 years working on economic growth models right across Southern Africa is that air connectivity unlocks all of these other aspirations. We work in tourism development. We help build convention bureaus. We help destinations grow tourist numbers. We help work with investment promotion agencies. We work with export development boards. We design strategies for destinations to secure economic growth. But the secret is that air connectivity unlocks all of those aspirations. So I think many of you will be here from airports looking to grow your revenue through passenger numbers. Some of you will be here from tourism boards looking to grow tourist numbers. Some of you might be working in investment promotion agencies, and you'll spend a lot of time recruiting new investors from around the world. But if you think about all of those objectives for economic development, connectivity, particularly for Southern Africa, is a major constraint, and secondly, will ease the performance of each of those aspirations. So what we find in the work that we do right across Africa is that the single underlying factor that drives success wherever we're working is more connectivity. The question is, how do you achieve it? And as John said, it's a highly competitive market for new routes. And there's a couple of different models that you can pursue as you work to get those routes. So we're going to start with a Slido, if we can move to that, just to understand the model that's happening in your destination, where you come from. And while we bring that up, let me just say thank you personally to Arif and the team from Zanzibar. I've actually been here since Saturday with my daughters. I don't think they're ever going to leave. They've had the most extraordinary experience here on this beautiful island. I'm one of those votes that said, this is the first time that I've been here, but it's definitely not the last, Arif. Thanks very much for having us. There should be some multiple choice options on that Slido. Maybe you can see it on your devices. Can you see them? There we go. Okay. So this is what we experience in places around Africa. Firstly, if you're sitting here today, you're part of a very elite group that AviaDev convenes every year to have conversations around how to grow connectivity. There's a lot of destinations around Africa who don't do this, who don't realize that they can be competing for more flights and that connectivity of the airline partners that they work with unlocks a lot of their other growth aspirations. So the biggest group, I would say, across the continent is sitting under number 5. They don't really do air service development. Everybody here does air service development in some way. Our model that we work on almost always involves a collaboration that includes a wide range of stakeholders across government and business, number 1. Others might have a limited collaboration. A third group could be driven entirely by the airport. And 3 and 4 are the same, so feel free to choose either one. And some places don't do air service development at all. But I think what John has done and the team from AviaDev is center the conversation around connectivity as a conversation that's super relevant for Africa. So that's why every year the event grows, and every year we see more and more partners joining the airports to present a joined-up offer to the carriers. And we're going to talk a little bit later around the carrier experience dealing with collaborative teams versus dealing with airport-only teams. Okay, so this is going to stay up, and we'll come back to the results in a second. We can go back to the slides, thanks. This is why there's an opportunity for us in this room. We know that Africa is the last frontier for global aviation growth. It's one of the reasons why all of us, when we're talking to big global carriers, have a degree of interest. The carriers understand that the last untapped market for growth is our continent, right? We've got 18% of the world's population, but just 2% of global passenger numbers, according to IATA. So if you're a big global carrier and you're serious about growth, you need to have a plan for Africa. You need to understand how Africa is going to develop and how it can be part of your growth story. We've been in hundreds of conversations with global carriers where we got into the room because we said we're representing a destination that takes growth seriously out of Africa, and we're looking to partner with you so that you can build a strategy for Africa that fuels your future growth. The question is, how do you do that? So we see a lot of approaches that risk fragmentation. And that approach tends to be entirely left to the airport, where there's an airport team that's often driven by airport revenues as their primary objective, looking to engage with carriers to grow their route networks, right? What happens then is you might have a tourism board or an investment board or some ministry that also suddenly wants to engage with that carrier. And those of you that come from carriers in the room will know what it's like to be approached by 6 or 7 different people from different entities representing the same market. Sometimes, like some of these airports you can see on the left, you'll have an airport that's big enough, with a big enough budget and enough heft to lead that conversation, drive that conversation, and secure those flights by itself. But you still risk this fragmented approach, where those other entities, other parts of government are giving perhaps a mixed message to the carriers, which is why we prefer to work on the model that you can see on the right, which is a collaboration, a joined-up approach. And there's a couple of examples there, not just in Africa. Barcelona's been doing collaborative route development for a long time, the Canary Islands. But fortunately, as John said, this idea of collaborative air service development is one that's really taken hold in Africa. And it's actually become a kind of African way of doing air service development. And if you're sitting, like many of you are, from some of the carriers at the bottom of this list, of the slide rather, you will understand the power of that joined up message when you have a single team representing all of the partners across a destination that can help make sure your seats are full. So it's not the only way, of course. The collaborative-led approach is what we tend to work on. But airport-led approaches do work, particularly when the airports are large and well-funded enough to drive the initiative all by themselves. But there is a trade-off, right? When you're talking about stakeholder buy-in, sometimes it's difficult for the airport to secure that buy-in, right? They're sitting probably under a transport ministry, and maybe they don't have the political heft to bring the other role players around them. In terms of decision-making speed, we find if you build a single team under a single banner, you can make decisions really quickly. Whereas an airport team might need a decision from a tourism board or from another ministry and not have the authority to secure that decision very quickly. Funding sources, obviously when you've got the stakeholders around the room, the collaboration formally representing stakeholders across government and business, you can partly make the argument for co-funding, right? Not leaving it to the airport alone to fund a route development effort. Market intelligence is also super important. The heart of a business case, we're going to talk about that later, is actually the data that you have and the insights you can give an airline into what's actually happening on the ground in your destination. Having the partners around the table who have first-hand access to that data is a very, very easy way of packaging it for the airline. Having to run around from the airport team to secure that data from a wide range of stakeholders, it's going to take a little bit longer, and it's going to be hard to join it up. Obviously, risk sharing, having a team approach means that you're in it together, and you benefit together, and you share the risks on the downside if your efforts take longer to pay off. The airport alone is carrying all of that risk. Marketing and route support is another area where, certainly when you've got the tourism board and the investment board and the private sector along with you, you're accessing directly a whole lot of marketing heft. So, for example, I know the Namibians work a lot with Gondwana, their biggest tourism company, and a lot of what Air Connect Namibia does is driven by the marketing support of Gondwana. Sustainability means you can work with the airlines on securing a long-term sustainable route. And when you've got those partners around the table to do that, it's much more effective than the airport, who may be driven by different priorities, including perhaps passenger revenues, which don't necessarily correlate with the overall objectives for the destination. So the bottom line is that we believe a collaborative air service development model, like you're seeing emerging across Africa, is better suited for developing countries, fosters alignment, and long-term sustainability. Here's a couple of those models we're talking about. So 10 years ago, Cape Town Air Access was started. On this slide, we also identified some of the private sector partners that came on board to support Cape Town Air Access. And there's a couple of interesting companies here. There's the biggest tourism companies. So I spoke about Gondwana in Namibia. But here in the Cape Town example, you had a company like Southern Sun, which has the most beds in Cape Town, or a company like the V&A Waterfront, which is the biggest tourist attraction in Cape Town. But you also had companies like Naspers, like Investec, like DHL, who had different aspirations. They needed the connectivity to fuel their business growth. Naspers, at that time, was running significant business out of China, and they wanted the Cape Town Air Access team to secure the connectivity through a carrier like Cathay Pacific through Hong Kong. We also had a company like Oceana running big American fisheries, looking for that connectivity direct to the US from Cape Town. The rest of the collaboration included regional government, city government, provincial government, and national government, all focused on bringing tourism, trade, and investment to Cape Town and the Western Cape. In 2015, the initiative was launched as a collaboration, and in the first 5 years landed 19 new routes, drove 23 route expansions, and added 1.5 million seats to Cape Town's route network. In 2023, Namibia set off on a similar path with Air Connect Namibia. And here you can see the collaboration includes companies like Gondwana, but also the associations representing the biggest businesses, the biggest tourism groups, and the biggest economic development initiatives, including the NIPDB, the Investment Board, all under the banner of Air Connect Namibia around the Namibia Airports Company as the lead partner. In that time, Air Connect Namibia has seen 7 new flights launched, 4 new carriers introduced, and there's 3 new routes currently under consideration and at discussion here at Aviadev today. Almost a year ago, Botswana Air Access launched with a very similar model. Supporting CAB is Hatab and Tabot. Welcome, Lily. Botswana, Business Botswana, BITC, Botswana Tourism Organization, creating a single story for carriers around growth in their business for Botswana. And we've already seen regional flights launched from Namibia, from South Africa. We know Botswana Airways has launched several new flights, and the project is gaining momentum within a few months of beginning. So you can see the story, which some people believed was perhaps a Cape Town story in the beginning, is now translating and growing effectiveness and impact in regions right across Africa. Now, how do we show up on the global stage? So one of the things we did was looked at Africa's impact at, in this example, a global route development conference, and the extent to which we're able to translate this conversation convened by Aviadev every year onto the global stage. And the truth is, we are underrepresented. Our representation, having air service development conversations with carriers around the world, probably reflects the stage of our growth in aviation in general. And I think one of the challenges to all of us in the room is how do we continue to make the impact, putting Africa on the global agenda between Aviadev conferences. Every year we come and Aviadev gathers more and more people to have this conversation, more and more stakeholders to support their airports. But we now need to take this message globally. We need to communicate effectively, not just as individual destinations, cities, regions, and countries, but I think as Team Africa, really, to say to the global carriers, we understand we're performing below our potential as a region. But Africa is rising as an economic player and as a tourism player, and the facilitation of that growth across our economic potential and our tourism potential will come from more connectivity. And we're getting more organized. We're getting more collaborative. We're able to tell you stories underpinned by data that show how, as a global carrier, if you help us solve our connectivity challenges, we'll create opportunity for your new routes. And that's actually something, even as we compete, perhaps, between ourselves as destinations, where I think we can agree we need to join up and tell our story much more loudly and much more effectively on the global stage. I don't believe Africa can achieve its enormous potential without us solving this picture of connectivity, and that's a job that we can do together. If you don't do it, think about the parties sitting around your system, the entities that are out there working, perhaps like your ministries, to provide stable and well-managed aviation systems, or your airport companies and aviation authorities regulating aviation in your country, or your tourism boards working to get more high-value tourists into your market, your investment promotion agencies, your national regional ministries of tourism, and your businesses represented in your chambers of commerce. All of those, if they're not involved in this conversation, if they're not effectively convincing global and regional carriers to drive connectivity, they're missing out on what I would suggest is one of the key drivers of all of their aspirations. Joining them together into a single team is a great way of helping them achieve each of their individual outcomes that can flow from connectivity. So in a little while, we're going to talk about the elements of a successful business case. But here's a little taster. The airline, as the airlines that you engage with this afternoon and tomorrow will tell you, they're looking first and foremost to understand a story of growth that comes from your data. But they're not just looking at airport data, right? If you're sitting here from an airport, you've got a very good sense of the number of passengers coming and going and which destinations they're connecting to. But you don't necessarily have the tourism data. You don't have the investment data. If the carrier gets a full understanding of what the data is showing about your destination, that's the most important element of a business case. But they'll also tell you when they come, they need approvals from a ministry. They might need traveling rights. They might need infrastructure adjustments. So making sure that you can offer that in a business case, that you can show the deep connectivity with your regulators and your ministries is the second factor. Thirdly, their primary interface with the destination is through the airport. That's why the airport is the heart of any route development model, even a collaborative one. Optimizing capacity and slots, making sure that your experience as a carrier is seamless and world-class at the facility, that's their first and most important engagement. But also assisting with launch events. Once you come, are we creating a fuss about you coming? Are we telling the market in a joined-up way about this new service that's connecting to a new part of the world? Dedicated marketing programs to support that, not just to launch, but sustained marketing throughout the lifetime of the flight. And then lastly, making sure that businesses and particularly tourism entities and those companies that can sell lots of flights are joined up to make sure that the route remains a success. This is what we would call a holistic support package, where the carrier's understanding that if they link to your market, they're going to get much more than just incentives from the flight that they launch. They're going to get a full, holistic package that makes sure that the route is a success. So I know Arif is going to welcome everybody to Zanzibar in a little bit, and then I'm going to come back and we'll unpack elements of successful business cases that have helped grow connectivity across Africa over the last decade. Thanks, Arif.